Katzcradul here. I am making this video at the request of Preppin' Junkie, who wanted to know how I make my ground round beef jerky. So I'm going to whip up a little batch here for her. I usually do a lot more than this, but it's late and I'm tired, so I'm just going to work with about 3 pounds of ground round. It is extremely lean. I also have had it in the freezer for probably almost a month. When I'm making jerky, I like to do that best rather than making it from fresh ground beef. I just think it adds a little bit of a safety, an added safety measure to me to have had that meat frozen for a while. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add these seasonings to my meat. And you can alter these. This is a very forgiving recipe. In fact, I don't really have a recipe at all. I just measured some of this out on a plate for you because I think it's about what I do, because I usually just open up my bottles of seasoning and shake them into my meat. But here's what I've got. I've got about a teaspoon, maybe just a little better, of black pepper. I've got a teaspoon of red pepper. This one kind of spread out. This is a teaspoon of Lawry seasoning salt. This is a teaspoon of onion powder and a teaspoon, or a little better because I love it, of garlic powder. So I'm just going to mix those up just a little bit. That alone is going to make it wonderful, just those seasonings, and then I'm just going to sprinkle it over. I will tell you, when I ordered my beef jerky gun, and I'll show you that in the next segment, the jerky gun came with some seasoning packets for the jerky. I did not like it at all, and I recommend that you make up your own seasonings to how you like it. Plus, a lot of the seasonings that they had in the packet had preservatives in it, and I didn't like that. So there, I've got my dry seasonings on my mix, and here's the wet seasonings I add. And I'm just going to give you an approximation here. This is the one I like to be very careful with. This is Liquid Smoke. This happens to be the best brand, in my opinion. Wright's Hickory Seasoning Liquid Smoke. Love it. It doesn't take much. Probably about a teaspoon, if that, is all I put in. The next thing that goes in is some Worcestershire sauce, and in this amount I'd probably put about 2 tablespoons. So I'm going to shake that in. This is going to be pretty wet. I like it pretty wet because it makes it easier to go through my jerky gun. And it really, ground beef jerky doesn't take very long to dry, so I don't mind that I'm adding a little liquid to it and maybe taking a little longer. Then I add a low sodium soy sauce because I've already put my seasoning salt in. So a good bit of that. I like teriyaki beef jerky, so if I use soy sauce and a little bit of brown sugar, which is what I'll put in now, this is about 2 tablespoons of brown sugar to 3 pounds of ground meat. That sounds kind of weird going in meat, but trust me, if you like teriyaki, you like that kind of flavor, it's wonderful. Also, if you're not going to make it teriyaki, if you're going to make it something else, if you're going to make it, you know, hot sauce and garlic or whatever, I recommend that you put a little bit of sugar in it because it just makes the meat taste better when it's dry. And then, this is not a name brand. This is a brand I get at Aldi's, but it's just as good. This is Louisiana style, you'll see, hot sauce. We like this stuff. My husband especially likes this stuff. So I put, let's see how much would be. I probably put 2 good tablespoons of that in there as well. And then, folks, it's time for your hands. There's just no other way around it. You really have to get your hands in here. But it doesn't take much mixing. I will tell you this, the ground round is very different than just regular ground meat. You can tell because you can just see the liquid on my hands. There's no fat in this at all. That is what you want when you're going to make ground meat jerky. You want absolutely as little fat as you can, as little fat in your meat as you can find. This happens to be a 97.3, meaning 97 lean, 3% fat. It's very lean. I can tell by how it feels. It's not, it just feels like the soy sauce and hot sauce on my hands. There's no greasy feeling whatsoever, and that's what you want. Can you make it with a little more fat in it? Yes, you can. But here's the problem you run into. When that meat begins to dehydrate, it will sweat the fat out, and it will sweat it in fat beads on top of the meat, and you have to pat that dry. You have to get that off, because if you store it with that fat on it, your meat will go rancid much faster. So my goal is to have as little fat in that meat as I possibly can. It makes a much better product, and it stores for a much longer time. Now here's what I recommend you do at this point. I recommend that you pat yourself out a little patty, and pat it kind of thin like that, and then put it on a microwave safe dish like this, and go pop it in the microwave. It won't, if you do it thin, it'll only take about 30 seconds. Pop that in the microwave and then taste it. Let it cool a little bit and then taste it and see how you like the seasonings. If it needs more of something, then this is the time to put it in, and you can make another little patty and taste it again, however you want to do it. But this is the time to check it, because once that meat's dehydrated, there's nothing you can do about it. So I'm gonna leave and go pop this in the microwave, taste it, see if the seasonings are right. I do this every single time and make any corrections that I need to make. I'll be right back. Before I begin loading my my jerky trays, I give them a light spritz with this, you can use any kind, Pam, whatever. This is just a canola non-stick cooking spray. And I just spritz it with that, because there's so little fat in the meat. I want to be sure that that meat releases off the tray when I get ready to take it off. So here's what I do. Here's the barrel of my jerky gun. I ordered this from Amazon.com for about $15. It came with this, and it came with the seasoning packets, and there may be one or two other nozzles. One is just one that's small and round, so it'll make what looks kind of like a Slim Jim. Then there's this one. There might have been one more, but I can't remember. I only ever used this long one right here. And so what I begin doing is I just load that barrel with my meat. And there's no real rhyme or reason. If you had a spatula, you could push it down in there. I do it with my fingers. This really is, you know, not for the faint of heart. I mean, if you don't like messing with raw meat, you might want to just go buy your jerky. I will tell you, though, that is an expensive proposition to buy jerky. A little 3-ounce bag, I was looking, it's about $1 an ounce, no kidding. I was looking at the checkout line at a store the other day, and it's really expensive. So I'm just going to set this down here a second. Here is the gun part of it, and you just press the handle and push the plunger back. Oh, no, sorry. You have to press it here. I forgot. Press this little button. Pull the plunger back. Just like if you've ever used a cookie press, just like that. And then you screw this on your gun. And I well, of course, you know it wouldn't be turned the right way. I like the nozzle, just like that. Just like that. So what I do is I kind of hold my finger up against this, and, well, that wasn't too good. Some of the liquid squirted out. I'm pressing on the trigger a little bit and holding the meat in, just getting some of the air out. Okay, here we go. Here's the first tray. Now what I do is I really kind of squeeze it out onto my hand. You know what? This meat might have been too lean. It just will hardly hold together. You know, meat that has fat in it, you have no problem holding together. So I just kind of form it like that, and I just lay it down on my tray. And then I push another one out. And kind of form it. is really lean. I'm not kidding. Okay, I don't think I've ever had meat this lean. So I'm pushing it out of my hand and cutting it off. And I can hardly get it to hold together. There we go. Maybe I shouldn't have gone with the 97.3. Maybe I should have gone up just a step. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just squeezing it out, keeping it thin in my hands. And the other thing I could have done since this meat was frozen is I probably could have laid the whole chunk of meat on a paper towel and gotten just a little bit of the moisture out of it. Okay, there's another one. The bowl of water, if the meat starts getting sticky and sticking to your fingers, you could just put your fingers in the water and then continue forming your meat. So what I'm going to do is get all my meat on my tray, and then I'm going to take it to my dehydrator, to the motor part. Here's what I recommend you have as well. I recommend you have a thermometer. This is just a little sleeve it fits in. It's a meat thermometer. They're not expensive. I think you can get them for $4. If you look at people who are giving wise instructions on making jerky, they suggest that you get the temperature up to 165 degrees quickly. And when I first started making jerky, they were saying that you should, that you can't trust a dehydrator to get up to 165. What you really should do is put your meat on a wire rack in the oven, bring it up to 165 degrees, keep it there for 10 minutes, then take the jerky out of the oven, then put it on your dehydrating trays. Well, that sounded like a lot of work to me. And so I got my thermometer and I heated up my dehydrator with nothing on it, and I laid my thermometer out of the sheath, of course. I laid my thermometer just like that on my dehydrator and let it run for about an hour. I came back, or maybe about 30 minutes. I came back and looked, and my thermometer registered over 165 degrees, and I was thrilled because I knew then that I didn't have to pre-cook it in the oven. And the reason for that is you want ground meat especially, you want it to get up to 165 degrees to be sure it's killed all the germs that might be in there. But if your thermometer gets up to 165 degrees, then you don't have to worry about it. You're good to go. So just check it with the thermometer. This is another thing good to have. If you're ever going to have to count on cooking in a cellar oven and you're cooking a big roast or something like that, you're going to want to have a thermometer to check the internal temperature of that, because you just don't know until you've checked it with the thermometer. And it doesn't matter what the thermometer on the oven reads. If you're cooking a big piece of meat, you want to check that internal temperature. So go ahead and, for safety's sake, invest in a $4 or $5 thermometer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get this jerky on the dehydrator. It'll probably only take about 4 or 5 trays. You should never run your dehydrator with less than 4 trays. It's just not, it's not efficient, and it's not as safe. You want to have air circulating through at least 4 trays. I'm going to get the meat on the dehydrator, and I'm going to let it cook while I sleep. I always get up in the middle of the night, and I'll probably check it in the middle of the night. Usually it takes about 6 hours for my meat to cook. I do like mine very dry. Now, some people like theirs to where when they bend it, it's kind of flexible. I like mine when I bend it to break, because the shelf life of it is longer. The more moisture you get out of it, the longer your jerky will last. I don't care that it's kind of brittle when I break it off. I don't need for it to be just real chewy. I like it how I make it, and I know that it's going to last a long time because I've taken as much moisture out of it as I can. So, in the morning, I'll let you see what it looks like, but it's just as simple as that. You know, I got to thinking when we turned off the camera, because I was forming so much of this by hand anyway, I do not like telling people they have to have a certain piece of equipment. And in fact, as I was working with this, I thought, you know what? You don't even have to have a jerky gun at all. You can do this. You can flatten this out by hand. Now, they're not all going to look exactly the same and be perfectly uniform, but I can get them the same thickness. In fact, looking at those, you can probably hardly tell which ones I did with the gun and which ones I did with my hand. This is about the size we like them, and I can shape that up with my hands, and my hands are pretty sensitive. I can feel the thickness that they are, and I can just lay that out like that. So don't think you have to run out and go get a jerky gun. In fact, my jerky gun isn't working very well with this meat. I really should have, after it came out of the freezer, taken it out of the package and let it sit on absorbent paper towels for about an hour. It would have been much easier to work with because the meat was just too wet coming out of the freezer. So there you go. You don't have to have a jerky gun. Don't think you have to go out and get one, because if you've got a dehydrator and you can go out and get good lean ground meat, you can make jerky. That's an exciting thing to know. Okay. Katzcradul here. Here we are. It's the next morning and the beef jerky has dried. I didn't put it on until about 11 o'clock last night, and I checked it about 3:30 this morning, and it wasn't quite dry. I had it on 65 the whole time, but it was almost dry, and I didn't want it to become too dry overnight, so I turned it down to about 135 from about 3:30 till about, and it's almost 7 o'clock now, so that didn't take very long, from like 11 to 7. I will tell you, I tested it at 3:30 this morning, and it's probably the best jerky I've ever made. I was so worried yesterday because I could hardly get it to hold together. It was so lean, and I thought I might have made a mistake, but I hadn't. Usually, when I take it off the dehydrator, what I'll see is little glistening beads on the jerky. And what you have to do then is you have to lay it on a paper towel, or you have to take a paper towel and dab all those glistening beads off. And I rub my jerky pretty vigorously to get that off, because that's fat that has risen to the surface, and you have to get that off before you store it. This has absolutely none. I've never made any jerky that has no little glistening spots on it, but this was the most fat-free meat I have ever seen. It is totally dry. One of the ways you can test it is it needs to kind of make a clicking sound when you drop it. It needs to sound, you see a little piece broke off. It is really dry. Now, I've seen some people, when they make jerky, their jerky just kind of bends. I don't like that. I like mine to actually be able to break in two like that. I'll do it again so you can see it. It breaks in two. It doesn't bend. Especially with ground meat, I want to be sure that I've got all the moisture out and that it is really cooked. Now, is this dry when you bite into it? Yes, it is. But with just the least bit of saliva, all the flavor begins to come out. It's delicious, and my family loves it. And I don't have to worry that it's going to mold and mildew in the jar. Now, this is one of those instances when you can use a jar that you've bought spaghetti sauce in or something like that. It's a perfect way to store your jerky, because after I put it in the jar, I'm going to take it to the vacuum sealer, and I'm going to suck all the air out of the jar so that there's nothing left. This has spaghetti sauce, so you can easily see that the little rubber gasket, has been stained red. But if your jar has a little rubberized gasket like that, and you can seal it down tight and put it in your food saver canister, then you can suck all the air out. And of course, you can use the regular canning jars in your food saver canister to vacuum seal it. So all I do is I just begin loading it into my jar. I kind of turn my jar on the side. That's how I can get the most in it. And begin sticking my jerky in. Got to tell you, I can't tell you what the shelf life of this jerky is, because in my house it doesn't have a very long shelf life. My family loves jerky, and the only way to keep it is to hide it. But this jerky will last several years if vacuum sealed, especially if you do it like I say, and you keep it, you make it where it's dry like this. You can also put it in Ziploc bags and put it in your freezer, and it stays perfectly well there. My family has no problem with eating frozen jerky. They'll grab a piece of it right out of the freezer. You can see it does shrink down a good bit, so 3 pounds was not too much. It made 4 of these trays, and I'm going to be able to get all of it in these 2 canning jars. In fact, I'm able to get 3 trays in this jar right here. Let me see if I can get that other one down. Yeah. So I'm probably not even going to use the other canning jar. I'm probably going to leave 1 tray out to eat. So that's 3 trays of jerky. So I did 3 pounds. So that's probably 2.5, 2 1/4. Oh no, I just did 2 trays. So that's 1.5 pounds of ground meat in that jar right there. I got 2 trays in here. So it's about 1.5 pounds of ground beef in there. I call this my silent, odorless meat because if there was ever a time when you didn't want to be known to have meat in your house, you don't want someone to smell you cooking on a grill or have smells coming from your delicious aromas of beef coming out of your house, you can open up a can of jerky. It doesn't have to be cooked, and you eat it and no one knows that you're eating meat. I really like that, and I like to have a good bit of it on hand. Now, the first time you've ever made jerky, this is the hardest thing to get off of your dehydrating trays. And what I recommend you do is that you fill your sink with just warm soapy water. Remember, for protein, you use cooler water. For fats and sugar, you use hot water to clean it. So this has protein on it. It's got meat juices. So I recommend you use a cooler water and just set your trays in your sink. I have the luxury of having a big enough sink that this will lay down in. The only other thing I want to tell you is I do not recommend using whole red pepper, the ones that have the seeds like you sprinkle on your pizza. I recommend that you not dehydrate that because it ends up being very hard. Hope you like this.